The Uranus-Sedna conjunction in Gemini is not simply a collective transit. It is a revelation of the hidden emotional architecture beneath identity itself. There are moments in history where reality itself begins to fracture, not through catastrophe alone, but through the slow collapse of the identities, systems, and emotional inheritances we once mistook for truth. Last weekend, we had the Taurus New Moon, with the energies of Mars, Eris, and Chiron combining as a rebellion, a deep-seated anger around the wounds of survival patterns and suppression. Hekate and Sekhmet were in square aspect to the moon, adding to that feeling of this being a point of descent and destruction, a point of initiation and deep truth. It was not the typically abundant feel of a Taurus new moon. And now, this week, we have this Uranus-Sedna conjunction in Gemini. It's exact on the 24th, but we'll feel its energy over a longer period. Something hidden beneath the collective psyche is beginning to surface now, and what makes this transit so significant is that it's not simply exposing external systems, institutions, or narratives. It is revealing the invisible architecture beneath identity itself. This transit reveals the inherited emotional realities we absorbed before we had language for them, the silences we adapted around, the truths we learned not to speak because belonging once depended upon suppression. Sedna is not a light archetype. She belongs to the deep ocean of the psyche, to exile, to abandonment, to isolation, to survival through fragmentation. In mythology, Sedna was cast into the sea by her own father, who sacrifices her in order to save himself. As she clings to the side of the boat, he cuts away her fingers, then her hands, severing her from the world above. From those wounds, the creatures of the ocean are born, and Sedna descends into the depths as goddess of the sea, ruler of exile, survival, instinct, and the unconscious. And now she rages against the disrespecting and dishonouring of her oceans, the fathers who rape her world. Perhaps this is why her archetype feels so alive now, as we feel the tide rising against the patriarchal stronghold that has enslaved us now for centuries. Many people are beginning to recognise that the identities they built to survive are no longer sustainable. The performance of normality is becoming harder to maintain. Old narratives are collapsing beneath the weight of unspoken truth. Emotional exhaustion is revealing where self-abandonment became structural rather than occasional. What once felt like personality is increasingly being recognised as survival identity. And add Uranus into this mix. Uranus does not preserve illusions simply because they're familiar. It awakens, it disrupts, it liberates through revelation. And in Gemini, this liberation moves through language, perception, thought forms, conversation, media, storytelling, nervous system patterning, and consciousness itself. Gemini is ruled by Mercury, and Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury. Where Mercury thinks, Uranus knows. Where Mercury processes, Uranus downloads. Where Mercury constructs meaning, Uranus transmits it. And Sedna pulls us beneath the surface of the mind into the deeper waters where memory, fragmentation, and meaning intertwine. We are entering a period where many people will begin to realise that what they believe to be their thoughts were often inherited frameworks they never consciously chose. Inherited patterns from past lives, generational influences, family systems, cultural scripts, religious scripts, survival identities, collective conditioning repeated so many times it became indistinguishable from truth. The Sedna Uranus conjunction feels less like intellectual change and more like psychic thawing as what was frozen begins to move again. For some, this may appear as emotional awakening. For others, it may emerge as nervous system stability, sensitivity, insensitivity, sudden clarity, symbolic dreams, unexpected grief, or a growing inability to tolerate falsehood in relationships, work, or identity. Hidden patterns rise because consciousness is attempting to restore coherence where fragmentation once became necessary. And perhaps most importantly, this conjunction speaks to voice, not in a visibility kind of way, but voice as truth-bearing, voice as reclamation, and voice as a return of something exiled from the self. Many women in particular are reaching a threshold where they can no longer maintain identities built entirely around adaptation, around emotional caretaking, around being digestible, pleasing to others, non-threatening, endlessly self-editing. The exhaustion so many feel is not simply burnout. It is the fatigue of sustaining identities that require continual self-abandonment in order to survive. Sometimes what we call insecurity is actually inherited silence. Sometimes what we call fear of visibility is the nervous system memory of what it once cost to be fully seen. Sometimes what we call confusion is the collapse of an identity that was never fully ours to begin with. This is why the current moment feels so emotionally charged beneath the surface. People are not only questioning systems, they're questioning the identities they conform to inside those systems. And yet, beneath all this disruption, there is something profoundly hopeful emerging. Sedna may well have been abandoned by her father, but she became mother to all creatures in the sea. She's not only the archetype of exile, she is also the archetype of transformation through descent, of wisdom received from the depths, of power reclaimed after fragmentation. Her mythology reminds us that what was once unbearable can eventually become a source of consciousness, truth, and embodied knowing. When we feel rejected or isolated, she reminds us that it's not what happened to us that defines us, but how we deal with that and how we become in spite of it. The deeper work now begins, not merely in fixing ourselves, not endlessly optimizing identity, not collecting spiritual language while remaining emotionally disconnected from our lives, but in remembering what existed beneath conditioning, remembering what the body knew before performance, remembering the self beneath survival identity, remembering the voice beneath suppression. This is not energy to think your way through. This is energy that is felt in the body. The body remembers what the mind learned to normalize. The sky reflects what consciousness is ready to confront, and the soul reveals what can no longer remain hidden. The next era of healing moves beyond surface self-development and into the territory of emotional architecture, soul memory, inherited patterning, and identity reclamation. People are becoming less willing to live divided from themselves. The old world taught people how to survive through self-abandonment. What emerges now asks whether we are finally willing to remember who we were before survival became identity.